What up, y'all? Dr. Elliott Morgan here. Today, we're going to be watching an absolutely infuriating clip from C-SPAN of Michael LaRosa, who I guess is a Democrat. I think he was like a former press secretary for Jill Biden. I also think he's the little man that lives inside John Fetterman and operates him with like levers and a steam engine. But before we dive into this clip, I thought it would be worth exploring this idea called the racist fantasy. I don't know why I thought about that. I don't know why I would possibly find this idea relevant to the clip we're about to see, but I guess we'll find out. So by racist fantasy, I'm specifically referring to an idea from Lacanian psychoanalytic theory that you can learn more about in the book The Racist Fantasy by Todd McGowan. But the gist is, the reason racism persists so much today is not just due to ideology, it's also due to enjoyment. It taps into this unconscious structure that is present within all of us, and it activates this kind of enjoyment that actually supersedes our rational faculties, and it even supersedes our own self-interest. Take, for example, LaRosa having to delete his ex account because he's getting rightfully blasted for the clip you're about to see. So the idea here, though, is that there's a benefit, right? And that benefit of the racist fantasy is the enjoyment. So how does it do that? Now, every unconscious fantasy consists of three parts, all right? There's the subject, the desired object, and then there is the obstacle. But what's unique about the racist fantasy is in that the racial other also functions as the obstacle. They're seen as both enjoying and prohibiting access to whatever it is that the racist subject desires. So say your desire is like unlimited wealth, which is unattainable, and someone comes along and they seem to have access to unlimited wealth. They don't pay taxes. They're coming across the border. They're taking our jobs. Ergo, you end up with a racist fantasy. So the racist subject has found their obstacle in the racial other. The kicker here is that the real source of enjoyment is the obstacle. In other words, if the obstacle is the racial other, the enjoyment comes counterintuitively from the person they're projecting that racism on. So imagine you're like super into technology and you're so excited about the new iPhone and you're waiting outside the Apple store and you're all night and you're sleeping in a tent, and you brought coffee and you're having a great time. You get the iPhone and you get home, you enjoy it for a little bit, and then there's this sense of like deflation, right? And the reason for that is because the real source of your enjoyment of the iPhone was in its absence. It was back when it was unattainable. That was when you really enjoyed the iPhone, i.e. in its unattainability. So the racist fantasy functions structurally the same way. Or maybe you desire some sort of like utopian past of a pure and untraumatized nation where it was completely free of all forms of contradictions and antagonisms, and 9/11 was just an anomaly, but it was also completely uncomplicated and completely one-sided. And then say someone like El-Sayed comes along and his very presence serves as an obstacle to that desired but ultimately unobtainable naivete. Now, if something like that were to happen, we might end up with a clip like this.
What kind of a democratic strategist are you? I mean, you come on a national show and you say that a must-win state like Michigan has an unfit candidate in El-Sayed for Senate. And I can see you saying that maybe in the run-up. I didn't vote for Saeed. I voted for Stevens. And it's okay. You could have promoted her as well. But now that we're down to the general, and are you trying to get Democrats not to vote for him? You can have your own personal views, which is fine. If you don't
Spoiler alert. Yeah, yes.
like El-Sayed and others. But as a Democratic strategist coming on a national program, I think that's totally unacceptable. And I think that you're doing a disservice. What do you say about
Stanley,
that?
before we talk to Michael, you said you did not vote for Abdul.
Real quick, I'm going to stop interrupting, but the look on the face, man, that's a tough face. So, I mean, it looks like he's
El-Sayed
pouting or like almost about to pout.
Will you support him in the general election?
Yes, I most certainly will, which is the reason I'm calling, as I'm calling on the Democratic line. He is not DSA. People try to put him off as DSA. He says he's not DSA. The DSA did not endorse him. And even if he was, Well, I don't understand Michael coming on and doing that. Yeah,
Great. Let's get an answer from Michael LaRosa.
Well, I've never supported
Oh. The immediate laughter.
a Republican in my life, for the Senate, for the White House, for Congress. And I don't live in Michigan, so I mean, my opinion really doesn't matter that much. But
Dude, give me a break, man. If you just say who little o' me, like at least be honest. Just play the part if this is the part you want to play. Read the script. You don't have to package it like, oh, and who little I don't live in. Who even cares what I think? Oh, I'm just on national television. I'm just, literally a strategist. I mean, I'm just,
could never support El-Sayed for a couple of reasons. One, there's certain things that do transcend politics, that do transcend parties. And that's okay. That's what I was saying. Vote blue no matter who. The problem with that is who still matters. At least it matters to me. And I just come from a time when I watched people jumping out of windows on 9/11, 70 miles from when the towers were falling and burning for 3 months. We could smell it from where I was from in Pennsylvania because of how the wind blew. It's personal to me.
Good Lord. Yes, certain things do, I would say, transcend politics and political parties. Racism is one of them. Now, I'm old enough to remember 9/11, and I think a lot of folks would agree that during that time, there was a general consensus that the reason 9/11 happened was they were attacking our freedom. Now, freedom here, I think, is basically an empty signifier. Like, it can mean anything. It's used essentially as a placeholder. Do you mean freedom to walk through the airport, security with your shoes on? Do you mean economic freedom? Or do you mean a kind of moral freedom? And I think that's what LaRosa is really trying to get out here, or get out of this, because that is what El-Sayed represents in his racist fantasy. Like, here in reality, 9/11 was a horrific act of terror, but it's also not something that occurred out of nowhere. And you have to stop with this like fantasy of naivete in order to understand that that's simply the reality. Historians have said it, foreign policy experts have said it, political scientists have said it. It's not really up for debate. There is such a thing as blowback. Now, that alone makes our own moral freedom unobtainable, and that is then slotted into a fantasy where El-Sayed can be morally free from taking responsibility for 9/11, and that's not fair to LaRosa. He needs El-Sayed to be actually responsible. I also think neoliberals in general, they just love their naivete. I mean, it is like the most infuriating thing to watch because it's pervasive. I mean, it's endemic, I think, to this sort of neoliberal democratic establishment and this whole culture of people who are strategists. And I see this all the time, especially like on Twitter, where it's just, I don't understand what's going on. I think, and it's like, stop, what are you doing? Like, grow up a little bit and understand that things are a little bit more complicated than you might want to imagine. But they have to pretend they're morally pure and innocent, and then they go and support like Mike Rogers, who has links with neo-Nazis, or LaRosa says that, yeah, sure, what Elon Musk did with U.S. aid was probably illegal, but Democrats should just really shut up about it. So as I see it, and of course this is not a diagnosis in any way, LaRosa is just your typical neoliberal Democrat who really needs to uphold their own unconscious desire for innocence and naivete. And so when someone comes along who calls that into question, then they symbolize the obstacle to that desire, which is where their enjoyment is really located. And I think you can almost kind of sense that, right? Like the way he's talking about all of these really morose things and really tragic things. It's almost sort of like he's, I guess, what do they say? What do the kids say? Centering himself. And he is. And I think it is far more insulting to the families of 9/11, to those we lost during 9/11, than anything El-Sayed has said, or anything that anything that anyone has said who he's campaigned with. Because I bet even those people have clarified and somehow taken it back. And El-Sayed has distanced himself from that. But none of that matters because this is a fantasy. It is a structural thing where he is slotting in an individual figure like El-Sayed, because El-Sayed represents that which he really wants. And what he really wants is to be perceived as a little baby who's never done anything wrong. And he wants to live in a nation that's a little baby that's never done anything wrong. And I think that this is why a lot of folks on the right get so, are rightfully critical of a lot of these kinds of liberals, because they do have this sort of like beautiful soul, innocent baby demeanor that they then use to enact some of the most hypocritical stances you could possibly imagine. So it's very frustrating. And I think it's one of the reasons when folks on MSNBC or CNN are criticizing those to the left of them and saying, well, it seems like they don't like Democrats even more than they don't like Republicans. Yeah, because I think that there is a real dishonesty, and I don't think it's just on the center-left side. I also think it's endemic across the political spectrum, but on the left, it often does manifest as this kind of beautiful soul thing. And I think as we're going forward, it would be helpful to acknowledge that and own it, and actually start taking responsibility both for when we find ourselves engaged in a racist fantasy and when we find ourselves as a country engaging in a racist fantasy. Because acting like we're just perfect and sinless and pure is A, really obnoxious, and B, transparent. And I think these are individuals who oftentimes just want power, they want social status, they want wealth, and above all, they want to be considered emotionally detached and rational. And when you are obsessed with that, you inevitably do irrational and dangerous things, whether it's in terms of damaging election prospects or actually going for policies that ultimately harm people and perpetuate the racist fantasy over and over and over again. Bit of a tangent, maybe check out the book. I probably misrepresented it a little bit, but at the same time, I got a little fired up there because I have an allergy to dudes who sit in front of cameras and they're like, oh, me? Oh, did I? Oh, man. Well, I just, I saw some really bad stuff that day, and if you disagree with that, then that means you're actually complicit in that, and I guess I'm just a little morally superior than you. Like, shut up. Anyway. It's a very professional analysis. And as always, like and subscribe. You're at the Spin Room because you can get that kind of professionalism almost every day of the week. And I will see you next time.